Hello, everyone, and welcome to this video by the Legal Studies guy. For many of you out there, this could be the first video you're watching, considering we are at 3.1.1, the first dot point of Year 12 Legal Studies. For teachers, perhaps you've watched some of the old videos from the old study design. This is our first video covering the new 2024 onwards study design, which has a lot of the same stuff in it, a few things taken out, but the reordering means we'll be basically redoing all of our videos moving forwards. Um, as I do in all my videos, starting with a quote, and I love this quote, it's one of my favorites, which is why I start with it, from Roald Dahl. If you have good thoughts, they will shine out of your face like sunbeams and you will always look lovely. Look, at the start of year 12, it is just worth reminding you all that you can't do it alone. You're going to need lots of support around you, and then where possible, always trying to look on the positive side of things, keep your spirits up, keep supporting those around you, just constantly trying to have those good thoughts because that's what's going to carry you through 2024 or later years. So today, as I said, we are covering off the first bit of knowledge in this new study design. So 3.1.1, for those watching for the first time, that means Unit 3, Area of Study 1, Key Knowledge Point 1. And today that is the distinction between summary offences and indictable offences. So the old study design was in at 3.1.2, pulled up to 1 as its own dot point this time around. What essential question are we going to be able to answer at the end of this video? Well, hopefully at the end of this video, if someone said to you, hey, what are summary and indictable offences and how are they different? You should be able to give them a really, really comprehensive answer to that question. So, straight into it. Summary offences are minor offences, okay, or less serious offences. They're dealt with by a magistrate alone. That means no jury, and they're heard in the magistrate's court. So, what we're doing here is, and you'll see when we get to indictable offences, just to jump ahead, being more serious offences, one of the key distinctions between the two of these is the level of severity. So, summary offences are those more minor offences or less serious. Sometimes we shouldn't say minor, considering any criminal offence is serious. But summary offences are, those less serious offences. So, they're dealt with in a different way to indictable offences. So, as I said, magistrate alone in the magistrate's court, there'll be no jury. So, we don't use jury for these. They can be heard in your absence, meaning that if you get summoned to turn up to the magistrate's court for your summary offence you've been charged with, and you don't turn up, the dispute can actually be resolved without you. So you can be found guilty and be given a sanction, even though you're not there. So that's a really, really important point because that doesn't apply to indictable offences. Generally speaking, the day that you're summoned to court is the day that the matter will be resolved. Some summary offences, you might have to, come back at a later date. There might be a little bit of case conferencing, but generally speaking, summary offences will often be dealt with on the day that you go to court. So no sort of repeat visits. Most people sort of know the idea of summary offences being listed in this very specific Act of Parliament called the Summary Offences Act. So it has a list of all the summary offences, although they can be found in other pieces of legislation. So particularly road safety guidelines and Road Safety Act will have some driving offences, for example, that are classified as summary offences, but a lot of them are found in this one specific piece of parliamentary legislation. They can attract any sanction. So if you're found guilty or plead guilty to a summary offence, it's not like they can't send you to prison, but they can only send you, so the magistrate can only send you to prison for a maximum of 2 years for each individual summary offence. Sometimes you're charged with more than one offence, and judges might stack sentences on top of each other. They can do that, but for each individual summary offence, there's a maximum imprisonment term of 2 years. But generally speaking, a lot of the time, summary offences will attract lesser penalties. So By lesser penalties, we're talking about things such as potentially discharge, which is where you don't get a criminal conviction at all, even though you plead guilty. You might get some kind of sanction, but you won't actually have a criminal conviction. Fines, community corrections orders, adjournments, etc. So, moral of the story, central difference, less serious offences dealt with in the magistrate's court, and then a bit of extra content there to help you along the way. And while we've got this image here, even though it's an American image, is the idea that, yeah, often if you want to, a lot of driving offences fall under the banner of summary offences. If you want to contest those, you would you would go to the magistrate's court. This is in contrast to more serious offences. Okay. And we refer all these more serious offences are known as indictable offences. And one of the big difference here is because they're more serious, serious breaches of society's guidelines, you'll be tried by a jury of your peers. So this is where a jury comes into a jury of 12. They'll be heard in the county or Supreme Court, and you have to be there. So summary offences are dealt with effectively a hearing with a magistrate. County or Supreme Court indictable offences, that's where we hold a full trial. So the key word being here, trial. They can't be heard in your absence. You have to be there. You have to be in the effectively the courtroom in the back in the dock. And yeah, they obviously can't do it if you're not there. Most or a lot of our indictable offences in Victoria are listed in this Crimes Act, the Crimes Act 1958. Really comprehensive list includes things like, causing injury intentionally or recklessly, causing serious injury intentionally, sexual offences, right up to things like murder, manslaughter, etc. The Because they are more serious offences, the level of sanction that you receive is higher. And that can include up to life imprisonment, which is the most serious sanction that we have in our Victorian criminal justice system. So, no sort of, different offences have imprisonment limits, like intentionally causing serious injury, for example, has a maximum of 20 years. So there are limits on different types of offences, but effectively, as indictable offences are more serious, you will get a increased sanction than if you committed a summary offence. There is this little caveat here that some indictable offences can be heard summarily, so you can basically ask for that to happen. So, for example, robbery offences under $100,000, rather than get a jury and have a full trial, you can actually ask for that to be dealt with through the magistrate's court. And this can be a really, preferable thing for an accused person if they can have it dealt with summarily, because generally that might speed things up, not needing to impanel a jury, waiting for the time it takes to have a trial, but also naturally the magistrate can't impose as big a sentence as a judge in the county or Supreme Court would. So there are some circumstances where you can have your more serious offence heard in the same way that summary offences are heard. So what we do in each video is we have a quick touch on then the key skills. So the videos will focus on knowledge, but then we'll address the skill that is generally attached to that knowledge. Now, for summary and indictable offences, there isn't like a really, really clear key skill in the study design that says, you need to explain or do this with them. So this one sort of does cover it, just the idea of define and use key legal terminology. And that's what summary and indictable offences are. It's key legal terminology that you need to know. So the sort of question you might get is going to be one that's more basic. Explain one difference between an indictable offence and a summary offence. Now, this is the first chance to sort of highlight some of the exam skills you're going to need in legal studies. And a really big one here is this idea of the word one. Okay. So anytime you see a question and a lot of our early questions we look at will have this. Anytime you see the word one, that is an absolute limiter on your answer. So you can't think, to get 3 marks, I'm going to go through 3 differences. Because as soon as you add more than one, as soon as you add a second or a third difference, an assessor will stop marking you. We can only, assessors are only allowed to mark the first difference given, the first reason given, the first factor given. So you must be really, really conscious of any questions that have numbers in them, because those numbers are real limits on your answer. Now, every question in legal studies is going to have a word in it that we will call a task word. And it's the task word that really tells us or shows us what we need to do in the question. In a way, it's our map that gives us the directions to how we can get marks here. And in this case, explain, which is probably not probably, is the most common task word we see in legal studies. If we want to explain something, all that means is we have to show an assessor that we understand the topic. So we need to show whoever is reading this answer that we really understand a key difference between these two concepts, an indictable offence and a summary offence. So show understanding. So how do we do that? Well, here's a sample answer. And I want to highlight a couple of things about this answer, and we'll build this up as we go through different questions throughout the year. A really, really clear opening sentence stem. So the question's asking us for one difference. So really clearly in the first sentence, we're going to identify that. One difference between an indictable and summary offence is the level of sanction that can be imposed upon an offender. So I've identified a clear difference. Now I need to go on and show whoever is assessing me that I understand what that difference is. I can't just leave it and state it. Hey, different level of sanction can be imposed. I need to actually give more detail to show how deeply I understand this. As indictable offences are considered more serious, they can attract significant sanctions right up to life imprisonment in certain situations, such as murder. This is in contrast. So this is a really important term. I'm showing a difference. This is in contrast to, so this is different to summary offences, which are less serious and can only attract a maximum prison sentence or term of 2 years and often lead to lesser sanctions. So really clearly showing that, hey, I know a difference, and here's some further detail that shows how deeply I know it. Indictable offences are like this, whereas summary offences are like this. The other key skill that's just worthwhile touching on early is this idea of synthesize and apply legal principles and information to actual or hypothetical scenarios. Now, this key skill is in every area of study that we have in legal studies. And it's the idea that 40 marks or half the exam is going to be case studies, so Section B case studies, but also in the non-case study section of the exam, Section A, they'll often give you questions that have little bits of stimulus material and a little scenarios as well. So we constantly need to be able to apply the content or the principles that we learn, such as the difference between summary and indictable offences, to actual or hypothetical scenarios. So what does that potentially look like? Well, we've just given another question here to sort of help you see what that could be later in the year. Ian was the victim of an assault by Jim. He suffered injuries as a result, including a fractured jaw. Jim was charged under the Crimes Act 1958 with causing injury intentionally, which can carry a maximum penalty of 10 years imprisonment. His lawyer has told him he will have a trial in the county court if he pleads not guilty. And the question could be, in terms of applying our legal principles, was Jim charged with a summary or an indictable offence? Give one reason for your answer. And in that first question, I probably should have had that bolded, because not often, when they do put numbers in exam questions, they will bold them. So was Jim charged with a summary offence or an indictable offence? And give one reason for your answer. Now, hopefully we can look straight at this after the content was just done and pick up a bunch of reasons. It's in the Crimes Act, which is where indictable offences are listed. Maximum penalty of 10 years imprisonment. Okay, so summary offences capped at 2 years. So if it's 10 years imprisonment, it has to be an indictable offence. And he'll have a trial in the county court if he pleads not guilty. Well, we know summary offences are dealt with in the magistrate's court. Indictable offences, county and supreme. So 3 reasons in here for why this is definitely an indictable offence. And we just need to pick one of them and provide that detail again. So for example, this could be what an answer looks like. Really clear statement again. Jim has been charged with an indictable offence. Okay, and that's going to get me a mark, that sentence. This is because, so giving a reason, the matter will be heard in the county court if he pleads not guilty. So that would be another mark realistically here, giving a reason. So getting the question right, then giving a reason. And then I'm just going to add some more detail to get those last marks. If this was a summary offence, it would be dealt with in the magistrate's court, meaning this is an indictable offence which is heard in the county court or higher. So really clearly showing that I understand what makes this a indictable offence as opposed to summary. So that would be 3 marks out of 3 there. The other thing that we're going to do in each video is cover off this skill here, and that's evaluate the ability of the criminal justice system to achieve the principles of justice. Now, you haven't learnt the principles of justice yet. Hopefully you did in year 11. Slightly changed this year. They've got it in this 2024 study design. So if you're doing it in 2024, there might be a slight tweak to our definitions of principles of justice, but we'll cover off principles of justice in video 3.1.5. But this skill is at the end of this area of study, and that's we need to evaluate the ability of the criminal justice system to achieve the principles of justice. So that means we already need to be thinking about fairness, equality, and access, even though we haven't technically learned about them yet. So every bit of content that we go over in our videos will have this table in it where we put in a little bit of content around missing the heading there, but how these the content that we've just learned achieves the principles of justice, or if we had anything over here, it would be doesn't achieve. Because when we are evaluating something, we are looking at strengths and weaknesses, goods and bads. So just a few points here. The fact that we differentiate cases based on their seriousness, so less serious offences to the magistrate's court, more serious offences to the county court and higher. This ensures that different courts develop expertise in dealing with different types of offences. So the magistrate's court are experts in dealing with summary offences, therefore ensuring a just outcome. So they're experts, which means they're more likely to apply the law correctly. Quality matters with similar levels of severity are dealt with in the same way. So everyone who's charged with an indictable offence gets a trial by jury. You can't waive that. You have to have a jury. Everyone who's dealt with by a summary offence, same processes, procedures. So equality there. And finally, access. The fact that we differentiate cases based on their seriousness again and send the more complex cases to the higher courts and the summary offences that are hopefully a little more straightforward to the lower courts means our system operates much more efficiently. So, there's 51, maybe more magistrates' courts around Victoria as opposed to far fewer county courts and then only one Supreme Court. So magistrates' courts are much better positioned to deal with a higher volume of cases, which is what summary offences are. Well over 100,000 of these will be dealt with through the magistrates' court every year. As opposed to well under 10,000, in the low thousands for indictable offences, many of which end up being dealt with summarily anyway. So it's I couldn't remember the exact numbers, but the number of jury trials that are held each year in Victoria. So for indictable offences, hovers around about 1,000, I think, off the top of my head, potentially lower, compared to over 100,000 summary matters being dealt with. So differentiating cases allows for a much more efficient system. In terms of anything further any further links that you might like to look at that we'll often put in the notes below these videos, nothing for these ones, just a recommendation that, as you start looking at news articles now, perhaps reading articles on cases, start thinking about that key terminology. Is this a summary offence or an indictable offence? Can I immediately pick that out based off the information that I now have? Ultimately, at the end of, not sure how long that's been, definitely longer than I intended, as it usually is with my videos. can we answer this question? If someone walked up to you right now and said, what are summary indictable offences and how are they different? Could you give them a really comprehensive explanation? If you had to write an answer to that right now, if you had to sit down with pen and paper, could you write a really comprehensive answer? I would hope and I would think that you would be able to. Um, as I said, this is for the 2024 onward study design. From here on, we'll have a video for every single piece of key knowledge. So yeah, if you've got any feedback, as always, feel free to leave it below. But welcome to Year 12 and happy studying, and hopefully see more of you soon.